Thank you, Erika. We will try to stick to the program and move now to the second session. So we have to change places.
Oh, yeah.
The three speakers of this second session are Alberto Spektorowski from our university, Tel Aviv University, Rafael Arenas Garcia from the Autonomous University of Barcelona, and Professor Alfred Tobias, they are all professors, and Alfred Tobias from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Alberto?
Sí.
Sí, empezás vos.
¿Cuánto tiempo tengo?
10 y 15.
A ver, ¿tú aquí? El vaso no, pero el agua. El vaso era tuyo. Pásame. Si pasas un vaso. Sí. Ah, sí, sí. ¿Quién está aquí entonces? No está aquí, mira, Rafael Arenas García. Yo me pongo. Él. No, pues.
Alberto, sí.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much, people, for being here and for inviting me. And let me start this exposition starting from what I define. I will divide this exposition from something that I started by saying the challenge of banality, and then step forward into the real theoretical important conclusions that can be reached or can be achieved from the whole conflict. Important conclusions that are related especially to how Europe deals with this kind of phenomenon. Let me put aside, first of all, when I say the question of banality, let me put aside, it's not banalities, it's real political questions. But let me put aside the question of nationalism and the theoretical debate of self-emancipation and the right to decide. Let me put aside what everybody knows, and things like this have been said before, about Catalonia as a collective identity, a nation, or whatever name we want to give it. Let me put aside the conflictive history of the relationship of Catalonia with Spain, especially, and not only, but during the Civil War, and after which nobody can paper out nor diminish as an important factor shaping the current political developments. However, the current developments leading to the imposition of Article 155 and the call for elections on December 21 is related, first of all, to one name for good and evil. And let's call it by his name, Mariano Rajoy. Okay, let's start by banality. Simple as that. The Rajoy administration attitude is in many ways what created this problem for the first place. That's just for very political terms. I'm not criticizing him. That's to be precise. After lengthy and tortuous negotiation, a previous socialist government had agreed about an statute of autonomy for Catalonia that developed further powers to the region in 2006. Let's be precise. This statute was put to vote in the Spanish and Catalan parliaments and endorses in a referendum in Catalonia. At that stage, support for Catalan independence, supported that Catalan independence stood in the Catalan people at just about 14%. The Conservative People Party, the PP, then in opposition, promised to reverse the statute unilaterally and took the issue to the Constitutional Court. In 2010, 210, the court struck down a large part of the statute. And the response in Catalonia and Barcelona was a huge demonstration of more than 1 million people under the slogan, "We are a nation, we decide." Okay, so let me put this point precisely. There is, no question in the Spanish democracy, I'm not questioning the separation of power. It's a very important point that the judicial power is separate, but let me put it precisely. Here happens the same debate too. The judicial power is separate, but it's very, very ideologically minded, and it's very conservative. And they won't change in an episode. What is written in the Constitution of 78. So the idea of Rajoy in the opposition of going to the Constitutional Court was a political decision, and from a political mind, namely a political mind, it could be a very clever. From the other side, if we think in the process of the conflict on the large scale, that could be disastrous. That depends from the lens that you look at the whole problem. Not surprisingly, the Catalan government supporters were outraged and attempted to negotiate with Rajoy about what would happen next. But the results were to drive up support for independence because there was a refusal to engage in any kind of negotiation that could change in minimum the constitution. Okay, the result was to drive support for independence, increase success for separatist parties in regional elections, the first of a series of attempts to hold a referendum on independence, and the replacement of the Catalan government's centrist leader Artur Mas by a more radical, if we can say more radical, Carles Puigdemont. Depends, again, what we find by radical or not. Though the first thing that we can say, they're very banal, this is nothing, it's just political. Rajoy decided to go to the Constitutional Court in order to ban the process of reform of constitution, pacted reform of constitution. That was as simple as that. In other words, what had been said before, the Catalans didn't want independence. The Catalans didn't want independence, wanted a reform of constitution for the reason that what's, related here in one way or another. Now again, as a classical defender of Spanish national conservatism and as a political leader of what at that time was an opposition party, the problem of national radicalization can work for him very well. I mean, from political terms, if we analyze, in terms of political science, might be the right move. In other words, he doesn't care exactly if there is going to be nationalization of radicalization in Catalonia, because there, at the same time, will be radicalization and nationalization in Spain. And those are votes that will be canalized by the PP. In other words, I am not entering into personal questions of the PP regarding to corruption, no. But if for political terms, simple political terms, nationalization works in that way. Who cares if the Basque country is more nationalist, more voters for nationalism or for separatism? That doesn't make any difference. The question that you need is more power to your party and to your position, which is the nationalization of Spain. From the political point of view, pure classical political point of view, it makes sense. So obviously that this is a problem for the future. That's another story. But it depends when you think in short range terms or long terms. That's dependent in that simple that characteristic. No, what else? Well, you could say, well, perfect. Then you have a problem. There's the nationalization, the tendency to separatism of the Catalan people. But basically, we have seen that very well. I mean, in the moment that you declare the 155 and you declare that unconstitutional, and you have the great majority of the Spanish people with you, probably, if we consider this, if Rajoy goes now to elections, he will have a tremendous majority. He will have a tremendous majority, and in political terms, simple political terms, and again, I'm talking about banality of the political terms, but it's very important, he probably will not need the Socialist Party. He has to vote for the budget. He will not need something that somebody, but a lot of people forget, but it's very important. He won't need the Nationalist Party of the Basque Country, which is the one that gives its votes for the voting of the budget. In other words, if the Basque Nationalist Party wants to negotiate with Rajoy the budget, he can do a lot of things. I mean, the party can do a lot of things. The party could, for instance, deal with the economical questions of the concierto económico in the Basque Country, which is something which is naturally accepted, but it could go a little bit forward on the question of the prisoners, for instance, that for the Basque Country, or for the National Party, or the Nationalist Party of the Basque Country, could be important at a certain point. Negotiating the budget with that, that kind of menace or threat is something that the PP doesn't want, and probably the PP needs a majority. From the political point of view, it makes sense, totally makes sense. So from the banality of that concept, we can say exactly what I said before, that he could play the cards as a nationalist and a political leader that could be, even, bracket as a kind of political genius, or the other way around, a totally failure. Because if this game fails, as a lot of people think, especially in this panel think, then he will be the one who triggered a tremendous disaster for the Spanish democracy, as was mentioned before, and it's something that must be considered. Okay, so this is the part of the banality. The next part is at the theoretical level. There is a concept that people are sometimes find difficult to discern theoretical. The plea for self-determination, the preservation of a national institutional design, is not necessarily a call for independence. The very idea of independence in current time, especially in the frame of European Union, is a kind of pure concept. As I said before, most Catalans, probably 80% of them, want the right to decide. But that doesn't mean necessarily the right to decide we want to go out from Spain. They simply want to say something very clear. I want to stay in Spain as the Scottish did, with respect to the Great Britain. The demand for national self-determination is not a new phenomenon. And this is something that you mentioned in comparative ways, and then I will remember again. European countries in particular face is often enough through the half century of decolonization and the rich negotiated settlements in the end of the nearly all demands for independence. Self-determination is, however, a very problematic concept, and it sometimes involves the clash of two rights. In the case, the right of the Catalan people to govern themselves, assert certain type of sovereignty and right of refer, and the right of Spain to maintain its national territorial integrity unless a majority of the Spanish people vote across the country as a whole to allow Catalonia to live. Britain and Ireland precisely, face across the country as more or less a similar problem. A majority of the people with Northern Ireland, a majority of the people in the east of Ireland wishes for a united Ireland under one government, but a majority of the population in Northern Ireland wish to remain part of the United Kingdom. The people of the United Kingdom, as a whole, didn't have a strong position, a strong opinion in the matter, but a majority would probably, if asked, have voted to maintain the integrity of the United Kingdom. The solution that was found is this clash of rights in the 1998 Good Friday Agreement was based on the principle of consent. There will be no change in the status of Northern Ireland unless a majority of the people voted for it to happen. The Republicans, who had supported the Irish Republican Army, accepted this solution and the violence ended. The principle of consent underlies the British attitude towards Scotland as well. The United Kingdom does not have a written constitution, and this is very important, which is very different from Spain. So there is no law rule on which nation with the state have a right to self-determination or not. But governments of all political parties accept that any decision on continued rule from London must depend on the consent of the people within that part of the country. That is why the British government has allowed one referendum on independence in Scotland and made it clear that it will respect the outcome. Canada probably is the best answer to this conundrum of self-determination, which after decades, it was mentioned before, and I will repeat it, after decades of separatist agitation in Quebec, the question went to the Canadian Supreme Court, which decided in a landmark judgment in 1998 that unilateral secession was not legal. The various international documents that support the existence of a people's right to self-determination also contain parallel statements that support the conclusion that the exercise of such right must be sufficiently restricted to prevent threats to an existing state of territorial integrity. However, and that's important, the justice ruled that if a referendum found in favor of independence, the rest of Canada will have no basis to deny the right of the government of Quebec to pursue succession. Negotiation will have to follow to define the terms under which Quebec would gain independence should it maintain that goal. This seems to be the obvious conclusion for the case of Catalonia, I think. Just saying, as Madrid says, that secession is unconstitutional, which it is, and it's not allowed by the law, by the Spanish Constitution, it's not enough answer, because of course the law and the Constitution and the constitution can be changed. The region does not have a right under constitutional law to unilaterally declare independence from Spain, but it becomes clear that if a large part of the people, possibly a majority, favor independence, the only sensible thing to do is to hold a dialogue with the leaders of the region. It's just a normal thing. Negotiations do not imply that the government is going to accept independence any more than the British government accepted a united Ireland in the Good Friday negotiation. The conservative government in Spain, however, has not allowed or refused to any such a dialogue. And the next and last point would be, after all this has been said, why Europe is so critical in this frame. I mean, why Europe is denying that thing. It's something very interesting. The argument goes, nationalism is against Europe. Secessionism is against Europe. Why do you want secession? Why do you want to create a national identity, some kind of sovereignty, whatever it means, that needless in Europe? I mean, Europe is about post-national citizenship. But here comes this story. You might want post-national citizenship, but Europe and globalization is going back to national citizenship. That's the problem. That's the real thing. And there's something much more important than that. That those different regions, state, nations, whatever you want to mention it, you can call it Flanders, or you can call it, Catalonia, the Basque Country, Scotland, whatever, the Flemish, even some kind of invented identity like the north of Italy, they are super Europeanists. In other words, the most interesting thing that is not against Europe, they are tremendously pro-Europe. Even more than that, they need Europe more than ever because the very shift is to get out from the mother country to go directly to Europe. The Scottish, you cannot speak with the Scottish without thinking about Europe, even no, more than ever now, which is, at the time that Britain is going through Brexit, the Scottish want to be in Europe. That's very classical. But still the concept, and I will leave it here because this is a theoretical problem, an interesting theoretical problem which goes further than this debate, which is why is the concept of Europe the people, or Europe of these people, so problematic for European political liberal elites? That's an interesting question. You have arguments in favor of this one and in favor of the other one. This is a very strong debate. It's related also to the questions of federalism and the question of confederalism. If they think about the Eastern United States, you can see and you can argue that this debate between federalists and confederalists is a problem that derives into tremendous civil war. So it's not just concepts. It's a very problematic concept also in Europe. I am not saying that this is going to lead to something like that, but obviously it's a very different thing when you talk about the Confederation of Peoples of Europe and when you talk about federation. And even in the question of Catalonia, it's very different. The concept of how to resolve the constitutional problem as the Catalonian national movement wants, and even the Basque government wants, than, for instance, the Socialist Party wants. The Socialist Party, for instance, wants a reconstruction or redefinition of the Spanish constitution in a federal way. But the constitution as a federal way, as the Socialist Party wants, is not precisely, for instance, what the National Party in the Basque Country wants, and it's not precisely the concept of the national movement in Catalonia wants, or more or less. But I think at the end of the day, I think that the debate will be based on the proposal of the Socialist Party. I think this is theoretically, when you find from one extreme to the other, we will follow into that more or less middle way. Okay, thank you very much.